The darkness between stars held secrets that few dared to seek. Captain Marcus Webb knew this better than most as he stood on the bridge of the Defiance, watching the endless void through reinforced viewports. His weathered hands gripped the command rail while his sharp blue eyes scanned the sensor displays. At 52, Webb had spent more years in space than on solid ground, and every line on his face told a story of battles fought in the cold emptiness between worlds. The Defiance was not the largest ship in humanity's modest fleet, nor was it the newest. Built 30 years ago as a deep space patrol vessel, it had been modified and upgraded countless times by its crew. What it lacked in size, it made up for, in heart and the stubborn determination of its captain. Webb had handpicked every member of his 40-person crew, choosing loyalty and skill over rank and politics. "Captain, we're picking up something strange on long-range sensors," reported Lieutenant Jamie Cross from the communication station. Her voice carried a tension that made Webb's instincts sharpen. Cross had been with him for 8 years and rarely showed concern without good reason. Webb moved to her station, his boots silent on the metal deck. "What kind of strange, Lieutenant?" "Energy signatures unlike anything in our database. Multiple contacts, moving in formation about 6 light hours from our position." Cross's fingers danced across her console, trying to filter the readings. "The power output is massive, sir. Far beyond anything we've seen before." Chief Engineer Tom Bradley looked up from his technical station, his graying beard unable to hide his worried expression. "Captain, if those readings are accurate, we're looking at ships that make our largest battle cruisers look like shuttlecraft." Webb felt a cold knot form in his stomach. For months, human colonies on the outer rim had been going silent. No distress calls, no final transmissions, just emptiness where thriving settlements once existed. Earth Command had sent the Defiance to investigate, expecting to find pirates or equipment failures. They had not expected to find evidence of something far more sinister. "Take us to silent running," Webb ordered. "All non-essential systems offline. I want us invisible to everything except our own eyes." The bridge lights dimmed as the ship's signature reduced to barely a whisper. The Defiance had been designed for stealth operations, and Webb intended to use every advantage they had. As they crept closer to the unknown contacts, the sensor readings became clearer and more terrifying. "Sweet Mother of Earth," whispered Navigator Zoe Park, staring at her display. "Captain, there are 47 ships in that formation. The smallest one is twice the size of anything in our fleet." Webb studied the tactical display, his mind racing through possibilities. The ships moved with perfect precision, their formation suggesting military discipline and advanced coordination. Their destination was unmistakable. They were heading directly toward the inner human systems, toward Earth itself. "Sir," Cross said quietly, "I'm detecting communication bursts between the unknown vessels. The language is completely alien, but the pattern suggests command and control traffic." The truth hit Webb like a physical blow. These were not human ships. Humanity had finally encountered another spacefaring species, and they were not coming in peace. The missing colonies, the sudden silence, it all made horrible sense now. Earth and her children were facing an invasion by beings with technology far superior to their own. Webb's jaw tightened as he made a decision that would change everything. "Prepare a data packet with everything we've recorded. All sensor logs, all communications intercepts, everything. We need to warn Earth." As the Defiance hung motionless in space, watching the alien fleet advance toward humanity's heartland, Marcus Webb realized that his small ship might be the only thing standing between his species and extinction. The odds were impossible, the enemy overwhelming, but Webb had never backed down from a fight in his life. He would not start now. Supreme Commander Vextar stood in the command center of the massive dreadnought Eternal Dominion. His forearms crossed behind his back as he gazed at the holographic display showing their target system. The Zephyrian was tall and imposing, his scaled hide gleaming purple under the bridge lights. Golden neural implants ran along his elongated skull, marking his high rank within the Empire's military hierarchy. To him, this mission was nothing more than routine expansion. "Status report, General Korth," Vextar commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had conquered dozens of worlds. General Korth, a smaller Zephyrian with silver markings denoting his intelligence division role, approached with a data tablet. Supreme Commander, our advanced scouts have completed their survey of the target species. They call themselves humans, and their technology is primitive at best. No energy shielding, basic fusion drives, and weapons that barely qualify as military grade. Vextar allowed himself a dismissive laugh. How many worlds do they control? 17 confirmed colonies plus their homeworld. Total population approximately 8 billion across all territories. Korth's tone suggested he found the numbers barely worth mentioning. Their largest warship is roughly 1/10 the size of our smallest cruiser. The Supreme Commander turned to face his fleet through the massive viewing ports. 47 ships of the Zephyrian Imperial Navy stretched out in perfect formation, their hulls bristling with weapons that could crack planets. Each vessel represented centuries of advanced technology and the collective might of an empire that had ruled the galaxy's eastern spiral for over 1,000 years. Have they detected our approach? Vextar asked. Impossible, sir. Our stealth technology is beyond their comprehension. Even if they somehow spotted us, their fastest ships would take months to reach their homeworld with a warning. Korth's confidence was absolute. We have studied their military doctrines and communications. They are fractured, arguing among themselves about territorial disputes and resource allocation. Admiral Zira, the fleet's tactical commander, approached from her station. Her cybernetic eye whirred as it focused on the holographic display. Supreme Commander, I have prepared 3 battle scenarios for the conquest. The most conservative estimate gives us complete victory in 47 hours. The realistic estimate is 18 hours. Vexitar examined the tactical projections with mild interest. The human fleet positions were marked in red, pitifully small dots compared to the Zephyrian formation. And the optimistic estimate? 6 hours, sir. Their resistance will collapse the moment they see our firepower. The Supreme Commander nodded approvingly. This would be another easy addition to the Empire's growing territory. The humans possessed nothing of particular value except their worlds, which would serve well as agricultural colonies once the population was properly managed. Some would be enslaved for labor, others relocated to less desirable systems. It was the standard protocol for primitive species. There is one minor concern, General Korth added, almost as an afterthought. Our long-range sensors detected a small vessel in the outer system during our initial approach. It disappeared from our scopes before we could identify it. Vextar waved a dismissive hand. Probably a mining ship or automated probe. These primitives scatter their crude technology throughout their systems like debris. It is of no consequence. What the Supreme Commander did not know was that the small vessel had been the Defiance, and it had recorded everything. Even now, Captain Webb's ship was racing toward Earth at maximum speed, pushing its engines beyond safe limits. The warning that could change everything was already spreading through human space. Admiral Zira returned to her station to finalize the attack plans. Supreme Commander, shall I order the fleet to battle positions? Not yet, Vextar replied, savoring the moment. Let them advance a little closer. I want their primitive sensors to detect us just before we strike. Fear makes conquest so much more efficient. The Zephyrian fleet continued its inexorable advance toward human space, confident in their overwhelming superiority. They had conquered species far more advanced than humanity, and this would be no different. In Vextar's mind, the humans were already defeated. But the Supreme Commander had made a critical error. He had underestimated the species he was about to face. Humans had a reputation throughout their own space for being unpredictable, stubborn, and dangerously creative when cornered. They did not surrender easily, and they never forgot an injury. The Zephyrian Empire was about to learn why that mattered. Captain Webb stood alone in his quarters, staring at the message he had just received from Earth Command. The holographic display flickered with the grim faces of the Admiralty, their words echoing in his mind. The Defiance's warning had arrived too late. The Zephyrian fleet had emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system, and Earth's defensive forces were scrambling to respond. Captain Webb, Admiral Harrison's voice had been heavy with resignation. Our projections show we cannot match their firepower. We're ordering all civilian transports to begin evacuation procedures. The Defiance is to return immediately and assist with refugee operations. Webb had listened in silence as they outlined humanity's retreat. Fall back, evacuate, survive to fight another day. It was logical, reasonable, and everything his military training told him was correct. But Marcus Webb had never been one to follow orders that felt wrong in his gut. He walked back to the bridge where his crew waited. Lieutenant Cross looked up from her station, hope flickering in her eyes. "Sir, did Earth Command send reinforcements?" Webb met each of their gazes in turn. These people had followed him through impossible situations before, trusting his judgment even when it defied conventional wisdom. He would not lie to them now. "Earth Command wants us to run," he said simply. "They want us to help with evacuations, while the Zephyrians take our worlds one by one." Chief Bradley crossed his arms, his expression grim. "And what do you want to do, Captain?" Webb activated the tactical display, showing the Zephyrian fleet's massive formation, 47 ships against his single vessel. The numbers were insane, the odds laughable. Any sane commander would follow orders and retreat. "I want to hurt them," Webb said quietly. "I want to show them that humans don't roll over and die just because someone points bigger guns at us." Navigator Park studied the enemy formation with professional interest. "Captain, even if we somehow damaged one of their ships, the rest would vaporize us in seconds. Not if we're smart about it." Webb's fingers moved across the holographic controls, highlighting specific points in the enemy formation. "Look at their movement pattern. Perfect military precision, textbook formation flying. They're so confident in their superiority that they're not even trying to hide their predictability." Cross leaned forward, beginning to understand. "You want to use their arrogance against them." "Exactly." Webb zoomed in on the fleet's supply ships, smaller vessels protected in the center of the formation. They've got fuel tankers, ammunition carriers, and what looks like a command coordination vessel. Take out the right targets, and they're perfect. Formation becomes a liability. Bradley was already running calculations on his engineering console. "Captain, I can overload our reactor core and rig it as a proximity mine. If we can get close enough to their supply convoy, the explosion would chain react through their fuel supplies." Park finished, her eyes widening with understanding. "But we'd have to get right into the middle of their formation." Webb nodded grimly. "And we wouldn't be coming back." The bridge fell silent. These were not young recruits looking for glory. They were experienced spacers who understood exactly what their captain was proposing. A suicide run against impossible odds, with success measured not in survival, but in how much damage they could inflict. Lieutenant Cross was the first to speak. "Sir, my sister lives on New Geneva. The Zephyrians hit that colony 3 months ago. I haven't heard from her since." Chief Bradley cracked his knuckles. "My grandson just started university on Earth. I'd like him to finish his studies." Navigator Park simply nodded. "The Defiance has been our home for years, Captain. If she's going out, she should go out fighting." Webb felt a surge of pride that threatened to overwhelm him. These people, his people, were willing to follow him into certain death for the chance to strike. One blow against humanity's enemies, it was everything that made their species worth defending. "All right then," Webb said, his voice steady. "Let's show these aliens what humans do when someone threatens our families." The Defiance changed course, angling toward the massive Zephyrian fleet. Her engines burned at maximum output as she accelerated toward her destiny. In the depths of the ship, Chief Bradley worked feverishly to convert their reactor into the largest bomb in human history. Aboard the Eternal Dominion, General Korth frowned at his sensor display. "Supreme Commander, that small vessel we detected earlier has returned. It appears to be approaching our formation." Vextar glanced at the tactical screen with mild curiosity. One ship? Are they attempting to surrender? Unknown, sir. They're not responding to our communications. The Supreme Commander laughed, a sound like grinding metal. Then they're fools. Target the vessel and destroy it. I have no time for primitive heroics. But as the Defiance continued its impossible charge toward the heart of the Zephyrian fleet, Webb smiled grimly. The aliens were about to learn their first lesson about humanity. When cornered, humans didn't surrender. They bit back. The explosion that consumed the Defiance and 6 Zephyrian vessels lit up the darkness of space like a newborn star. Captain Webb's final gambit had worked beyond his wildest hopes. The chain reaction through the enemy fuel convoy had crippled nearly a quarter of their fleet, sending shockwaves through ships that had never known defeat. Supreme Commander Vextar stood amid the chaos of his command center, his forearms trembling, with rage and something he had never experienced before, fear. Warning klaxons blared as damage reports flooded in from across the fleet. The impossible had happened. A single primitive vessel had dealt a devastating blow to the mighty Zephyrian Empire. How? Vextar's voice was a barely controlled roar. How did one ship penetrate our defenses? Admiral Zyra's cybernetic eye flickered as she processed the tactical data. They used our formation against us, Supreme Commander. They knew exactly where to strike for maximum damage. This was not random luck. This was precise tactical planning. General Korth's silver markings had dulled with shock. Sir, the humans are broadcasting the battle footage across all communication channels. Every species in this sector is seeing what happened here. On distant worlds throughout the galaxy, alien races that had lived under Zephyrian oppression watched the recordings. With growing amazement, the Corvan mining colonies, enslaved for generations, saw the footage in secret gatherings. The proud Alteran warriors, defeated and scattered, felt hope stir in their hearts for the first time in decades. The gentle Nexari philosophers, forced to abandon their peaceful ways, whispered among themselves about the courage of these unknown humans. Captain Thane Korvik of the Corvan Resistance sat in a hidden asteroid base, replaying the battle footage for the dozenth time. His scarred hands gripped the console as he watched the small human ship charge into certain death. They knew they couldn't win, he said to his lieutenant, a young Corvan named Vera. They knew they would die, and they did it anyway. Vera's large eyes reflected the glow of the screen. Why would they sacrifice themselves for so little gain? Thane leaned back in his chair, understanding something profound. Because sometimes it's not about winning. Sometimes it's about showing others that the fight is possible. Across the galaxy, similar conversations were taking place. Species that had given up hope began to remember what resistance looked like. The Zephyrian Empire had built its power on the belief that their technology made them invincible, that resistance was futile. The humans had shattered that myth with one desperate act of defiance. Back at the battle site, Supreme Commander Vextar struggled to maintain control as his fleet's morale crumbled. The Zephyrian military doctrine had never accounted for enemies willing to die rather than surrender. Their psychological warfare tactics were useless against a species that turned sacrifice into victory. Sir, Admiral Zyra reported, her voice carefully neutral. We're receiving communications from several Empire outposts. There are reports of civil unrest on Corvan mining worlds, and the Alteran Resistance has launched coordinated attacks on 3 garrison stations. Vextar's secondary arms clenched into fists. The human action was spreading like a virus, infecting the Empire's subjects with dangerous ideas about resistance and freedom. What had been a simple conquest was becoming a galactic nightmare. Order the fleet to continue toward the human homeworld, he commanded. We will make an example of their entire species. Let the galaxy see what happens to those who defy the Empire. But the damage was already spreading beyond Vextar's ability to contain. On Earth, Captain Webb's sacrifice had bought precious time. Human engineers worked frantically to analyze the Zephyrian technology fragments recovered from the battle site. What they discovered changed everything. Dr. Elena Vasquez, head of the Earth Defense Research Division, stood before the Emergency Council with findings that would reshape humanity's future. The Zephyrian technology is advanced, but it's not magic. Their shields operate on frequencies we can disrupt. Their weapon systems have predictable recharge cycles. Most importantly, their ships are designed for overwhelming firepower, not adaptability. Admiral Harrison leaned forward intently. What are you saying, Doctor? I'm saying Captain Webb didn't just hurt their fleet. He showed us how to fight them. Vasquez activated a holographic display showing new weapon designs. We've been thinking like we need to match their power, but we don't. We need to be faster, smarter, more unpredictable. Across human space, the word spread. Mining ships were converted into mobile weapons platforms. Cargo haulers became stealth raiders. Every human vessel, no matter how small or outdated, became part of an irregular fleet that refused to fight by conventional rules. The Corvan resistance established secret contact with human commanders, sharing intelligence about Zephyrian weaknesses. The Alterons began coordinating their attacks to coincide with human strikes. Even the peaceful Nexari contributed, using their mathematical genius to predict enemy movements. Supreme Commander Vextar found himself fighting not just humans, but a growing coalition of species he had thought thoroughly beaten. Every victory came at a higher cost. Every advance met with increasingly fierce resistance. On a hidden asteroid, Base Captain Thane Corvick met via encrypted communication with Commander Rebecca Santos of the Human Resistance Fleet. Two species, separated by light years in biology, united by a common enemy and the inspiration of one man's sacrifice. The humans have given us something we lost long ago, Thane said. They've shown us that the Empire can bleed. Santos nodded grimly. Captain Webb always said that sometimes you have to break a few rules to get things done. I think he'd approve of what we're building here. The Zephyrian Empire, which had ruled through fear and overwhelming force for a millennium, suddenly found itself facing something it had never encountered before. A galaxy that refused to stay conquered. The battle for Zephyr Prime, the Empire's capital world, raged across 3 star systems as the largest fleet in galactic history converged on the seat of tyrannical power. What had begun with one human ship's desperate sacrifice had grown into a coalition of 47 species, all united by a simple truth that Captain Marcus Webb had proven with his life. Even the mightiest empire could fall if enough people refused to kneel. Commander Rebecca Santos stood on the bridge of the new Defiance, a ship built from salvaged Zephyrian technology and human ingenuity. Around her, the combined fleet stretched beyond the horizon of space. Corvan mining ships converted into missile platforms flew alongside sleek Alteran fighters. Nexari science vessels provided tactical coordination, while human stealth frigates prepared for deep strikes into enemy territory. All fleet commanders, this is Santos, she broadcast across the coalition channels. Remember why we're here. Every species the Empire conquered, every world they enslaved, every family they destroyed. Today we settle that debt. Supreme Commander Vextar watched from his fortress world as the impossible armada approached. His remaining fleet once, the terror of the galaxy, seemed small against the swarm of ships bearing down on Zephyr Prime. How had it come to this? One human vessel, one moment of defiance, and now his 1,000-year empire crumbled around him. Supreme Commander, General Korth's voice was hollow with defeat. Our outer defense grids are reporting massive casualties. The coalition forces are using tactics we've never encountered. They're not fighting like a conventional fleet. Indeed, the attackers moved like a living thing, flowing around strong points and striking where least expected. Human ships would appear from nowhere, deliver devastating attacks, then vanish before the Zephyrians could respond. Corvan vessels used their mining equipment to tear through enemy hulls like paper. Alteran fighters danced through defensive fire with impossible grace. But it was the Nexari contribution that proved most devastating. Their mathematical models had predicted every Zephyrian response, every tactical decision. The Empire's rigid military doctrine, once their strength, became their weakness as the coalition anticipated their every move. Dr. Elena Vasquez coordinated the scientific assault from her command ship, watching as human-modified weapons tore through Zephyrian shields. Target their command frequencies, she ordered. Every communication relay, every coordination node, make them blind and deaf. The space around Zephyr Prime became a graveyard of imperial ambition. Ships that had conquered countless worlds burned in the void, their crews learning too late what their victims had always known, that tyranny carries the seeds of its own destruction. On the planet's surface, Captain Thane Korvik led the ground assault with a mixed force of liberated species. The Zephyrian capital city, built on the bones of conquered civilizations, trembled as orbital bombardments shattered its golden spires. For every slave who died in your mines, Thane roared as his forces breached the imperial palace. For every world you burned, for every dream you crushed, this is our answer. Supreme Commander Vextar made his final stand in the throne room of the Empire, surrounded by the treasures looted from 100 worlds. When the coalition forces finally reached him, he was not the proud conqueror who had dismissed humanity as primitive. He was a broken figure staring at the ruins of everything he had believed about Zephyrian superiority. Commander Santos entered the throne room with representatives from every liberated species. It's over, Vextar. Surrender now and we'll show you more mercy than you ever showed others. The former Supreme Commander looked up at the diverse group before him. Humans, Corvans, Alterans, Nexari, and dozens of other species standing together as equals. How? He whispered. You are nothing. Scattered, weak, primitive races with obsolete technology. Santos smiled, thinking of Captain Webb and the crew of the original Defiance. You made one critical mistake, Vextar. You forgot that courage is more powerful than any weapon, and that people fighting for their freedom are the most dangerous force in the universe. The Zephyrian Empire formally surrendered 3 days later. Across the galaxy, slaves walked free from their chains. Conquered worlds raised their own flags once more. The oppressed became the liberators, and those who had ruled through fear learned what justice meant. In the aftermath, a new galactic council was formed, based on equality rather than domination. The memorial to Captain Marcus Webb and the crew of the Defiance was built not on any single world, but in the very space where they had made their stand. It served as a reminder to future generations that sometimes one person's courage can change the fate of an entire galaxy. Years later, children of a dozen species would learn the story of the human captain who refused to run, who chose to fight against impossible odds, and who proved that no empire, no matter how mighty, could stand against the united will of free people. The legend of the Defiance lived on, inspiring new generations to stand up, fight back, and never surrender to tyranny. For in the end, Captain Webb's sacrifice had done more than damage enemy ships. It had awakened something in the galaxy that could never be conquered again. The spirit of defiance itself, burning bright in the hearts of all who chose freedom over fear.